drive-in miles away, but they don't have a real indoor, sit-down movie theater. And they'd never experienced that, so that was something they wanted. And so Abby, who is the young woman holding the microphone in the picture, she took the lead on it, and she presented it at one of those intimidating adult-filled rooms that we've all had to make presentations in front of. And she talked about this idea for a movie theater. And one of the adults turned to Abby and said right to her, "That idea is too big. It will never work. You shouldn't even try." Now, I would like you to be shocked on Abby's behalf. But none of you look particularly shocked, because people have done this to you too, haven't they? People have thrown brick walls in front of your idea. And they sound so familiar. We tried that once in 1974. That's not the way we do things here. That's never going to work. Slow down. We want to ask more questions. Give us some time to think it over. Now let me ask you, did that adult in that meeting room, did they hate Abby? Were they worried she was going to succeed and they better stop her? No. What were they thinking? They were trying to protect Abby. They were worried she was going to fail. It was going to make her feel bad. She would be embarrassed. And they thought they'd spare her feelings by telling her not to try. And you might be tempted to agree with the slow down, I've got more questions approach, but it's a trap. And it's a trap because, look, where's Joe? Look. Okay, y'all get to know the inside information here, and I'm going to drive the video guy nuts because I'm going to do that. That's me. That's little tiny me at the Fitchburg Furnace. All right. Anyway, the reason it's a trap to say slow down, I've got more questions, is because our brains overestimate the risk of failure. Author Margie Worrell said that doctors have been able to use an MRI and watch our brains while we're estimating the risk of failure, and we overestimate it, which makes sense when, the physical world was far more dangerous around us. That would be protective. Well, now it causes us to say things like, Abby, don't try your idea, because we're maybe overestimating that risk of failure. Our brains also trick us and they lie to us about the risk of inaction and the risk of sticking with the status quo. And the risk of inaction is that even if you're on the right track, you can get run over if you just sit there. So while we're talking it over one more time, and we send out for an expert opinion, the world is changing around us. And if we haven't learned anything else in the past few years, we should have learned that the world really is changing around us, and quite quickly. And so I want to give you a moment to think about your big goal for your community. Just pick one thing that you want to think about for tonight, and we'll work on ways to make that happen. So just one goal or one idea. So pick one out in your head. Okay, not 2 pages worth of goals, just a goal. Now, I like to start with take small steps, because that sounds like the easiest part, right? Like we can just take small steps. So the old way in community leadership to take small steps is to hold the meeting and write the plan. And we've all had to do this. It's really entrenched. You gather up, you meet and you plan and you plan, and then these guys who are at the back are like, you see these guys looking over your shoulder here? You know these guys, because they're the ones that are going, oh, I think you should also add this whole other thing that you didn't even think of. And then there's that one guy, you know this guy, he's the one going, oh, the chamber said they were going to do something like that, and we shouldn't step on their toes. You can't try that. So we can't take any action until we've met enough and planned everything out and nailed everything down, and then we can take action. So if that's the old way, then that implies there must be a new way. So there's the idea-friendly way is let's just test it out. Let's run a test. there's bound to be some small way we can make this idea happen. So the community of Pascagoula, Mississippi, ended up with some tiny housing that had been used as temporary housing during the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. They had been wanting to encourage a spirit of entrepreneurship in their community, but they didn't have very many people who could afford to buy a downtown building, completely rehab it, put a few $1 million into it, and then start their business. And so what they did is they took their tiny houses and they lined them up. There's about a dozen of them in a big U shape around this big empty lot. And so now local business people who want to start a business can rent a tiny house and start a tiny business. And then if that's too big, they could actually, they hold these market events regularly. You could start your tiny business with a table on the grass. And then you could move up, maybe you'll have a tent next time. And then if that works, you can small step your way up to renting a tiny house. City officials say that this has worked. It has helped to build wealth through entrepreneurship and improve equity in their community. It's giving opportunity to more people. And they're seeing people that not only go from tiny to the tiny houses, but then they're seeing businesses move into their downtown into a full-sized space because they had the chance to start small with a tiny test. Another community that did take small steps is from the Umatilla Electric Cooperative in Oregon. Robert Eckenrode said that right at April 2020, they could see how their businesses were being affected by all of the changes with COVID and the closures. They wanted to start a business resource center, one place that people could come and ask questions, get support they needed, and find out about the new stimulus programs. So they started with that idea of like, let's make one place where they can find out. And they, in 5 days, opened up. It took 5 days from idea to open. They used a building they already had. They didn't wait for the perfect building to come on the market. They used the services that they knew that they could explain, the programs that they already knew about, things that they could find out about, and they started by explaining those. They did not sit around and debate, well, what services do you really think businesses will need? They didn't try to compare to what some other town was doing. They took the idea and they started with what they already had. If it hadn't worked out, they hadn't risked very much. Some ideas will fail. Maybe even most ideas are going to fail. But if we keep the tests really small, then failure is just that free, high-quality research into what works and what doesn't. And the secret to that is keeping the size of the steps really small so that the tests are small, so that the risk is small, so that if we fail, the loss is small. And as we take each of those small steps, we're getting out there in public in the community sooner. If you are stuck in the room in meet and plan mode, nobody knows you're making any progress. But if you're out in the community taking small steps, then people can know what you are doing, they can see what you're doing, and they can be attracted to what you're doing. Now, when you apply the concept of take small steps to the process of going into business, that's the innovative rural business models. Tiny and temporary ways that you can do business together and ways for people to try a business idea without investing too much. They're using this in the Zuni Pueblo in New Mexico to make their community a place that businesses can start really small with little push carts, with open vendor spaces, and then they have these shared vendor shelters where they hold shows so their artisans can take small steps to grow their business sequentially. So how could you take small steps on your idea? I'll give you a moment to write that down now. Or to think about it. You can make notes on your phone too. Okay, so we've done our small steps. We're going to gather our crowd. We've got a big idea, and we need to make those small steps so people feel like they can play a role in it. So the old way to take small steps is to assign people to committees. So I actually got an email from an organization in my community, and it says, "We are planning for our annual program. Please see attached committee list and let us know which committees you are willing to serve on. Thanks for your support." This is perhaps not the best way to approach people. The new way is something like what the State and Sublimity Chamber of Commerce did. They killed off the committee structure. They only gather people when they need them for a specific project or activity. Elena Turpin with their chamber explained it and said, that way your organization becomes a movement that people can get behind and not just another volunteer opportunity. She said, we spend more time explaining to people how we make a difference in the community. And that's the whole secret. If you want to be a movement, you explain how you make a difference in the community. When I visited Caldwell, Kansas, population about 1,000, we had a group in the room and I had everybody introduce themselves. So as we went around the room, I noticed that certain people, probably my age and older, introduced themselves by the organizations they belong to and committees they serve on. So one gal says, oh, I serve on the Chamber of Commerce Executive Board. I'm a member of the Alumni Association where I'm one of the executives, and I volunteer at the library. Okay, so that's her list, right? It's organizations. By the time we get to the back of the room, why are the young people always at the back of the room? Well, when we got to the back of the room, the young people are going, oh, well, they don't have organizations, right? So they're talking about activities they enjoy doing. So one of the gals from the back says, I like to garden. She didn't say, I'm in the garden club. She said, I like to garden. She said, some friends and I do a book club because we like to read. And that's why I started a little free library. So it's these activities that she likes to do. She's not telling you affiliations and organizations, but activities. There's a group in the Roanoke-Chowan area in North Carolina that their big goal was to make progress in their communities as a whole region together. And a new program had come out that was the empowerment zones. And so they had this big goal of applying for an empowerment zone because it was going to give them federal money and special programs and other incentives that would be really helpful for them. So they got the group together and they worked on the application process together and they got turned down. Remember, most ideas may fail, but they had just tested it. They found the movement was too valuable to stop. And so they continued to get together to work on issues important to them as a region. They have kept it informal. There's always a fellowship meal. And that way it's not a committee to serve on. It is a movement to be part of. And together, they've been meeting for 20 years now, and together they have leveraged more money than the federal government offered them for the empowerment zone all those years ago. They became that movement that people could get behind. So how could you turn your idea and those small steps into activities people like doing and a movement that people can get behind, one that makes a difference in the community? Francine has thoughts. That's good. The town of Pullman, Washington, like your town, is on a hillside. So every time it rains, and because they're in Washington State, it rains all the time. So the rain washes the dirt and leaves and everything up on their sidewalks. And so I went there for a visit, and they explained to me they really had a problem with the dirty sidewalks. So this is not like I'm slandering Pullman. They know this. And so while we're on the walk around, they're talking about this issue and discussing what they should do. And when we got back to the room after our walk around, one guy said, you know what? We've done cleanup days. We should do another cleanup day. And they said, The Chamber of Commerce did the last cleanup day, and we think that Chamber should do another one. Which is an awful way to handle anything, right? Because the poor chamber director, she picks up her pen. She's like, okay, I'll write it down. I'm going to do it. I said, no, you don't get to do it that way. I said, if you won't take the lead on it, you don't get to assign it to someone else. If it's not your priority, then it doesn't need to happen. And you can see, they were kind of uncomfortable with that idea. Now, what changed is, at the center back, there's a table with a white tablecloth on it, and there's like a vase of flowers on that table. And behind the flowers is a business owner named Willow. And Willow raised her hand and said in a very small voice, I'll clean my own sidewalk. I said, that's great, that's a start. But we have to get from just Willow cleaning her sidewalk, like we need to clean all the sidewalks. So how are we going to get there without doing just a cleanup day? So here's what actually ended up happening. I said they should hashtag it and put it on Instagram and tag 2 friends and call it Clean Your Own Sidewalk Day. They did it. I kid you not. Willow started this movement of everybody, let's clean our own sidewalks. And so they do it on Wednesday afternoons now. They sweep their own sidewalks on Wednesdays, and then the next morning in the early hours, the city sends around the street sweeping machine. It's beautiful, it's elegant, it's simple, it didn't require much. It's just like, just clean your own sidewalk. That's all we're asking. But this is the best way to attract people who are initially resistant to your idea. Because if Willow had spoken up when we were walking around the downtown, I'll show you where Willow is. Do you see the guy with the wide red and white stripes on his shirt? Willow's right behind him. She's not the one in sunglasses, she's the other little tiny face. If she had tried to convince everyone in that walk around that they should not do a cleanup day, they should all clean their own sidewalks and the city should change the work schedule on the street sweeper, who would have listened to her? They wouldn't have. They'd have been like, no, we're doing another cleanup day. The chamber, pin it on the chamber again. No. So she instead attracted them through taking action in a way that people could get behind. So this is the volunteer motivation curve. This is the one we've all been working from. And I actually want you to either sketch this in your notes, or if you've got your phone, you may want to shoot a picture of this, because you may want to explain this to somebody else. The curve starts here. This is you, and you are the person most excited about your idea. Right? Like it was your idea, you're the most excited about it. The next person down the curve is your buddy who helps you with everything because they always help you with stuff. They are like half as excited as you are. And then it just keeps going down from there, right? And then we get to the dotted line. The dotted line is the end of the committee. People on the big end of the line, these are the people that we've assigned to the committee. And then there's other people who are interested, but they are down here on the long tail. They're not very motivated. They're not very interested, just a little bit. Okay, so the way we have looked for volunteers is we're looking for people with this much motivation, right? Serve on the beautification committee all year round. Give up your entire Saturday, it's going to be really hot and miserable, and we're going to clean all of the downtown together. We're looking for this much motivation. How many people do we find with this much motivation? The same 10 people, right? Okay, so let's flip it. We're going to put your excitement as the foundation. You are now the foundation. The next most excited person adds on to that and adds on to that. We don't have to have a committee anymore because we're looking at the activity that people enjoy doing. We can look for people with just this much motivation. If you'll just clean your own sidewalk. That's all I'm asking. Clean your own sidewalk. Just do it once. Take a picture, tag 2 friends, right? Much smaller. So now we're looking for people with much lower motivation, and it all adds up. So we're ramping up what we can accomplish by asking for people with even lower motivation. And there are some people who have no motivation at all or negative motivation. You know the negative motivation people. They're here to tell you what a bad idea it is. I'm sure that they had these people in the Roanoke, Chowan area who are like, you'll never get an empowerment zone. And then when they didn't, they're like, told you so. And then you're still going to those meetings? I'm not going to that. It's a waste of my time, right? Like, we know those people were there. Those are not your people. You cannot lose people who were never yours. So how can you make smaller but more meaningful steps for people? Sweeping your sidewalk is meaningful. It's helping clean up downtown, but it was smaller, just your own sidewalk. How can you do that to your idea? So now we're going to turn your crowd into a powerful network. We're going to build connections. So the old way to build connections, Jessica is an actual economic developer in a small town in Idaho, and she told me she really wanted a microbrewery in her town. And she may live in the only town in Idaho that did not have a microbrewery. And so the old way for her to get a microbrewery in her town is to make a proposal to the Economic Development Board, right? So you write the proposal, you make it to the board. The board can discuss it, and then they can refer it to the Subcommittee on Business Development. The Subcommittee on Business Development can debate it repeatedly, right? Do they think it? Do they like it? And then when they can't decide if it's a good idea, they can order a feasibility study. See, you know this is true. You know it's true. They can order the feasibility study. The expert starts on the feasibility study. Do they visit town? No, they just look at public data. They write the same feasibility study they've written for 3 other towns. They just take out the other town's name, search and replace, put your town in it, update the numbers, and they send that back to the subcommittee. The subcommittee can now review the feasibility study. They can even order a change to the study if they're feeling ambitious. Or they could like debate it for a few times, send that back to the full board. Okay, so now we're back at the Economic Development Board. They can discuss it again, and now they can consider and go, you know what, it's a great idea, feasibility study is positive. We'll put this on our 5-year development plan. On the 5-year development plan, eventually maybe they can offer some incentives, or we can start negotiations and try to get somebody to open a microbrewery in our town. You know I have an easier way to do this, right? You know there's a new way coming. We are going to start a homebrew group. We're going to get guys who like to brew beer at their home, and gals who like to do homebrew beer, and we're going to get them together in somebody's backyard, and what is going to happen? They're going to drink beer.
People are going to come.
People are going to come, and after about 2 beers, somebody at that meeting is going to go, I could run a microbrewery. And all his buddies are going to go, yeah, you should totally start a microbrewery. Now, you probably know somebody that was a microbrewer or a home brewer and then started a public brewery. But what if they have this whole group of people to support them who can help them make connections to the agencies that they'll have to follow the rules of, or they can help introduce them to other people running microbreweries, or they can like come help them work out problems or help them find suppliers. Because they build connections first, they're going to be more successful. And I do want to point out, knowing that Joe Crawford is involved in all things within at least the county, that when I say that we should like have a homebrew gathering, I do not mean a meeting with like a president and a treasurer and minutes and the old business and like none of that. It doesn't need to be run through the EDA. It doesn't have to belong to anything. It can be guys and gals in a backyard having a beer with a friend and going from there. That's okay. Another group that's building community by building connections is Middle Tennessee Electric. They have a big goal of spurring more adoption of electric vehicles in their area and to show people how much electric vehicles have changed in the past just few years and how much different the technology is, they've started the EV car club. This is the simplest idea in the world. They started with their own employees who own EVs. They let anyone join. You do not need an electric vehicle to join, because this will be the place where you learn about EVs, where you get to take a test drive, where you get to look in the inside, look under the hood. This is your chance to be part of a group of other people interested in the same subject. Do you think this will get more people to buy electric vehicles in their area? I think so, because they're helping them find ways that it would work in their own lives, because they're building connections. And building community is really quite simple, because community happens when people talk to each other. And people like to talk to each other. It's really not that hard to get people to talk to each other if you'll get them in the same place. And sometimes you can add just one more step to what you're doing, and then you can kind of build a bridge between two groups of people that might not otherwise meet. The Elevate Douglas County Partnership, Doug Miller, this is in Georgia. What they do, they have new companies that come into town. They do the ribbon cutting, and then this is the golden shovel version of it. And so who comes to the ribbon cutting and the golden shovel? Like the economic development people, the chamber people, the elected officials, right? Like that's kind of the usual people. What they do in Douglas County is they get to know the people who are moving into the community, and they find out what causes they're interested in and what issues they care about. And then they go out into the community and find the people who are already working on those things. And they bring them to the ribbon cutting. These are people who would normally never come to a welcome ceremony. And then they take the time to introduce them, make connections, and then they take them back around later. They're really bridging those people into the community by realizing this is an opportunity to connect people and build community. And when you take this process of like getting people together and letting them support each other, and you apply it to going into business, that's the rural jobs creation strategies. I just make these names up because they have to have a name, okay? He's like, what is she talking about? Okay, so the rural jobs creation strategies is when you get entrepreneurs together and they support each other. This is a group from Brownsville, Texas, and they get together and they tour each other's businesses. So it's like the backroom tour where they get to see the behind the scenes part of other people's businesses and go, oh, how do you handle that? That's really cool. And they get answers from somebody just like on their own type of language and not like expert language. So it's all very much peer-to-peer, supporting each other and developing that way. That's how we create jobs in rural areas today. So how could you build connections? Look back at your idea and think of a way you could get people into the backyard together or the back room and talk about it. I put the entire idea friendly back up there in case you wanted to shoot a picture of it or note it down. If you don't learn anything else from me today, write this one down. You don't have to know all the answers. There's so many questions, so many challenges that we're all facing, so many things that we don't know. You don't have to know what the answers are, as long as you are willing to be open to the new ideas that will come and be presented to you, and may even be ideas that you think initially are stupid. That may be the greatest idea ever. You don't know until you get to hear it. And the idea-friendly method means to let go of judging those ideas. So even if you think it's a stupid idea, instead of saying, well, that's a stupid idea, maybe you'd like to greet the new idea. Like if I introduced you to a new person, you wouldn't be like, well, that's the dumbest shirt I've seen anybody wear today. No, you would start with, good to meet you, right? So in the idea-friendly method, someone brings you a new idea, then you want to say, if you have to make that face, go ahead. Make that face and go, all right, but how could you take small steps? right? Like there's bound to be a way to take small steps, even if it's stupid, right? Like some small steps you can try. You look like the kind of guy that may have had a stupid idea in your lifetime. Oh, yeah. Okay. Goodness knows I have. All right. So the reason I show you this picture is because do you remember Abby who wanted a movie theater and they told her, that'll never work. It's too big. You shouldn't try. Abby, fortunately, had been to a talk and heard the idea-friendly method. She knew she could take small steps. She and the other teens borrowed the high school's movie theater, or the auditorium room, the big auditorium room at the high school. They made it a movie theater. They went and found out how to do projection. They figured out everything that they needed to do to make it happen. They picked a movie for little kids and invited the grade schoolers to be the audience. And so the teens sold tickets, ran the concession stand, did the projection booth. For one day, those teens created a real indoor, sit-down movie theater experience for those little kids because it was something those teens wished they could have had when they were kids. And when you tell people their ideas will not work, you miss out on some of the amazing things that your community can create together. The consensus does not come from holding a vote in the meeting. Okay, who thinks that's a dumb idea? Okay, that's what we've been doing for a long time. Consensus comes, it emerges from the actions that people are willing to take. If we had taken a vote in that meeting room in Pullman, Washington, they'd have all voted for the chamber doing another cleanup day. Instead, Willow got out and swept her own sidewalk and started a movement. The consensus followed her, but she took the first action. Now, people may not go exactly like you would want, may not do it your way, but you pick your direction. You clean your own sidewalk. And people that want to do that too can come with you. The question that Margie Worrell says we have to ask ourselves is, how will inaction cost us 1 year from now? And I have the story of Winoka, Oklahoma. Do you remember I told you I wrote the T-21 for Winoka, Oklahoma? This is that story. Winoka, Oklahoma got a T-21 grant back in the day, and so they were going to get a new streetscape, like the sidewalks and the light poles and everything. And they started through the process, and eventually the architect shows up at a city council meeting with 3 copies of 3 plans and drops them on the council table and says, basically, pick one. This is a town of 990 people. There are 8 city council members and a mayor. None of those people are architects or engineers or urban planners, nor do they have it on the staff of a town of 990 people. They have no way of knowing which one of these plans will work. And so they spent a long time bringing the plans up over and over again, debating the details, discussing what would maybe work, because they were worried. They were worried they'd make a mistake and fail and leave them with a design that they were stuck with for decades. But they didn't have any tools. Now, the old way, I'm going to skip over that because that's for the next folks. All right, the old way is the rendering, right? Like the architect draws one of these and goes, that'll be fine, right? Like you can totally tell how that's going to work in the real world. No, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go down to City Hall and we're going to get a copy of the plans. Charlotte works the desk at City Hall in Winoka. You just ask Charlotte for the plans. And then you take them out on the sidewalk and you go, it says there should be a ramp right here, and you take your duct tape and you mark a ramp on the ground, and then you label it, ramp. And then it says there should be some potted plants, and that's why this picture's up here. Look at those potted plants. They just drug them in. There's supposed to be a plant border there. They went and stole some plants from some outdoor place. And somewhere on the plans it says there ought to be a brick border. And so you're going to go to your neighbor's house. There's a pile of bricks in the backyard, and you're just going to borrow some while he's not there, and you're going to lay those out where it says there should be bricks. And you have built a real-life rendering of what goes on in that plan. And then you can walk through it and see how well it works in the real world. And you can invite the whole council to walk through with you. And we could actually hold a big party downtown and invite everybody to walk through this and give their feedback. And people may notice things that you wouldn't. And that's how you avoid making that long-lasting, unchangeable mistake and still actually get something done. You take small steps by creating this rendering. Now, I told you I was going to do it. You have to test. The difference between my town and your town is huge. The difference between like a Maine fishing village and some Kansas prairie town and Irvin is huge. You have to test these ideas. How long do you think that architect spent in the town of Winoka before he brought those plans? Like a day? Like it was half a day? No, we have to test those ideas. Hey, thanks for the ice cream this afternoon.
If I would have known.
What? Okay. This is important, though. The time has passed when a few influential people could gather in a room to decide what the future of your city will be. Instead, the future of your town is decided every day by the actions taken by all the people. And it's based on what they believe the future of your town is and what role they see for themselves in it. That's from civic expert Carol Coletta. This is another one you can write down if you didn't learn anything else. It really will never go back to the way it used to be. We have to start from where we are and go forward. The easiest way to do that is one small step at a time. You are the people who are best positioned to spark the change in your community. Some of y'all have been with me all day and have put in a lot of time on this. That's how I know the fact that you're here tonight. I know you're the people who make things happen and who are interested in your community. We actually have some tools at Savior.town. I know that Joe reads these, but I think he hoards them and doesn't let anyone else know about it. But we have weekly emails with ideas like this that we share. I think about a dozen times today, Joe has turned to me and said, "You wrote an email about this." And yes, this is a story that came from there. But you all can sign up for those emails. They're free. We also have things like our small town creed, and we have some videos. And we actually made a video that you can share in your community if you're interested. If you go to savior.town/gift, we have a 30-minute version of this talk that you can share with anyone else to teach them the idea-friendly method. If you want to use it in some way, in any way, feel free. This is a great place for questions, if you have any, although I know it's light and kind of warm. We all been working all day. I know Joe's been working me all day.
Well, while you think about any questions you may have, I just want to say thank you again to Becky. It has been a wonderful day. I can't wait to have you back again so we can show you all of the things that we get accomplished. I do want to say real quick, a huge thank you to the folks who stepped up to make Becky's visit possible, and that would be Citizens Guarantee Bank, Mercy Health, Markham and Wallace Hospital, and the Irvin Masonic Lodge and Order of the Eastern Star. Such a great combination there.
Thank you, folks.
Definitely. And also want to say a big thank you to Tiffany and the Estill County Public Library for being here, being a great community partner, being here after hours to make this possible. So Becky, I want to thank you again, and for all you folks watching on video, if you've got any questions, please just pop them down in the comments, and we'll talk back to you there. So thank you very much for tuning in.